Our topic for this video is agricultural ecology. Now we'll be looking at the meaning of agricultural ecology, we're looking at components of farm ecosystem, the interaction of these components of agro-ecosystem in some farm settings, as well as farm inputs. So first, the meaning of agricultural ecology. Agricultural ecology is defined as the study of crop plants and farm animals in relation to their environment. Now, environment here is not just limited to maybe the housing or anything so solid. When we talk about ecology, it refers to both living and non-living part of the environment. Now, ecology was derived from a Greek word known as oikos, which means home or dwelling place. Now, in other words, we'll now say that agricultural ecology can be defined as a field of study that deals with the relationship of living organisms with one another and with the environment in which they live in. Okay. Now, agricultural ecology is divided into two. We have horticology and we have synecology. Now, horticology is concerned with the study of an individual organism or a single species of organism in its environment. So we are talking about one unit. So an example is maybe if we say we want to study a single cattle and its environment. Now, synecology, on the other hand, is concerned with the study of the interrelationship between groups of animals, groups of organisms or species, maybe crops, that are living together in an area. For example, if we say we want to study the different fishes in a fish pond in relation with their aquatic environment. So now we're no longer talking about one unit, we're talking about a group. That is what synecology is all about. So we'll look at the components of ecosystem, of farm ecosystem. Now, before we do that, we would like to understand that ecosystem refers to the community of crop plants and farm animals that function together with their non-living environment. Okay, so in other ways, if we were to rephrase it, we say that ecosystem consists of living factors, that is the plants and animals, and that interact with the non-living factor in their farm environment. Now, the farm ecosystem is split up into two major components. Now, this component is now the biotic component, that is also the living component, and the abiotic non-living component. Now, first, for the biotic components of the ecosystem, biotic components just includes all the living things in the ecosystem, like the crop plants and the farm animals themselves. So the biotic components can also be grouped into two classes, which are autotrophism and heterotrophism. Now, autotrophism is where you find a group of organisms that make use of sunlight or chemicals to manufacture their own food, or even from inorganic substances during the process of photosynthesis. Now, in other words, these autotrophs is where you find mainly the crop plants that produce their food through the process of photosynthesis. So this is why they are called the producers. They produce their own food. So the second class is heterotrophism. Then for the heterotrophism, the group that is here is the group of organisms that are mainly farm animals, and they cannot manufacture their own food, but instead they depend directly or indirectly on plants for their own food. Now, this is why we call them the consumers. They don't produce, they consume. Now, farm animals that feed directly on these green plants, that is the producers, they are what we call the herbivores or the primary consumers, like the cattle, sheep, goats, rabbits, etc. Now, moving to the abiotic component of the farm ecosystem. Now, the abiotic components of the ecosystem includes the non-living parts, the non-living groups of things. Now, these are things like the climatic factors like rainfall, temperature, wind, humidity, sunlight, etc. Then inorganic materials and nutrients like carbon dioxide, oxygen, nitrogen, calcium, phosphorus, etc. Then we also have edaphic factors like soil, rock, topography, and then other factors like dust, storm, fire, water, etc. Now, these components interact differently in the farm settings. Now, we'll look at the interaction among the components of agroecosystem in some farm settings. The first one we'll be looking at is in monocropping, or what we know as the sole cropping. They are the same thing. Now, monocropping is a system where there is just one type of crop that is grown on the farmland at a particular time. For example, if you come to a farm and it's just a maize farm, only maize that is planted on it, or kola nut or oil palm farm. It's only that particular crop that is on the farm. Now, the interaction between the biotic and abiotic factors in the environment include that the crop plants will absorb nutrients from the soil in order to grow. The crop plants will also absorb water to grow and produce food. And then the crop plants here will also take in carbohydrates from the air to carry out their photosynthesis. There is a production of their food. Now, the next interaction we'll look at is in the mixed cropping system. Now, mixed cropping system involves the growing of two or more crops on the same piece of land at the same time. Now, crops like maize and cassava, cowpea, can be cultivated at the same time on the same piece of land, and their interaction will include that the crops like cowpea is able to add nutrients to the soil. Now, crops like cassava will obtain nutrients from the soil to grow and produce fruit. Now, the leaves of all these crops that fall on the ground will in turn decay and add nutrients to the soil through decomposition by soil microorganisms. Then, in the mixed farming system, note, I did not say mixed cropping. We already did mixed cropping. It's different from mixed farming. In mixed farming, it involves the cultivation of crops and rearing of animals simultaneously, side by side, on the same piece of land. Now, the farm may be divided in two parts, one part for growing of crops and the other part for growing grasses so that the livestock can feed on that part. Now, this interaction will now include that the grasses or the remains of the crop will now serve as food for the animals, while the animal dungs and droppings are now used as organic manure to improve the soil fertility for the crops. And then some of these crops like the cowpea and crop residue may now decay to release nutrients to the soil. So you see the interaction that is going on. Then finally, we'll look at the farm inputs. We know that farming is an essential activity if we want to provide food and other agricultural products that we need for our different activities as man, whether it's just for feeding or to help our lives in the aspect of shelter or clothing. Now, we can liken it to a system where there are various inputs such as seeds and fertilizers, machinery, labor that are used up or modified in order for them to be transformed to produce output, which we now use as food for our livestock and different products that man consume. Now, these agricultural inputs are essential for successful farming, and they can have a significant impact on the quality and quantity of the final product. So this is why we study this farm inputs. Now, we'll discuss a few of them and see they are important. Now, these agricultural inputs, they are broadly categorized into two main categories that are the heart of rural marketing and development. Now, these categories, these main groups, the first one is the consumable inputs, that is materials like seeds, fertilizers, pest control chemicals, manure, and even physical labor that are used up. They are consumed by the crops during this farming process, and they are usually organic and are essential to the productivity of the farming venture. Then the second group of agricultural inputs is the capital inputs. Now, these ones are the mechanized and technological materials, and they are more advanced and they just aid speed, accuracy, and yield of farming activities. They are like in the form of the tools that we use, the materials that we use, the machine that we use, all these things that involve capital investment. Now, these farm inputs have classes. We've seen the groups that they are put into, but then there are classes, and these classes are based on different criteria. Now, the first class is based on source. Now, some inputs can be classified as natural, synthetic, or maybe a combination of both. Now, natural inputs like manure, compost, and other organic materials are the ones that come naturally. They are from the natural source, while synthetic inputs like chemical fertilizers and pesticides are manufactured in the industries or in factories. Now, some inputs such as hybrid seeds are now a combination of both natural and synthetic materials, because the seeds, they come naturally, yes. Then when they are enhanced, they are no longer exactly natural. So they're a combination of both natural and synthetic materials. Now, another class of farm inputs is based on function. Now, inputs can be classified as inputs for growth. Some will be for protection, while some are for mechanization. Inputs for growth include things like fertilizers, seedlings, and seeds. Then the inputs for protection include pesticides and other crop protection products. Now, inputs for mechanization will now include the tractors, the plows, the planters, harvesters, and other farm equipment. Now, another class, the third class of farm inputs is based on application. Now, some inputs can be classified as soil applied, foliar applied, or seed applied. Now, soil applied inputs are applied directly to the soil, while foliar applied inputs are applied directly to the plant's leaves. Then, the seed applied inputs are applied directly to the seed before planting. Now, the fourth one is based on the crop. Now, some inputs can be classified based on the type of crop that they are used for. Some inputs are crop specific, that is, there's a particular crop that they work on, while others can be used for multiple crops. For example, now, a fertilizer that works well for corn may not be suitable for the likes of rice or soybeans. Then the fifth one is based on sustainability. Inputs can be classified as being sustainable or unsustainable. Now, the sustainable inputs are those ones that can be used in ways that does not harm the environment, such as maybe the organic fertilizers, biological pesticides, and conservation tillage practices that don't put much impact on the soil itself or the soil structure. Now, the unsustainable inputs are those ones that have negative environmental impact, like the synthetic fertilizers, the chemical pesticides, and intensive tillage practices that break down the soil somehow. Now, these farm inputs that we've been talking about their classifications, what are they really? Like examples of the farm inputs that we have. We have the first one, we have the seeds. The seeds are like the most important input for farming because they are the source of the plants themselves. Like farmers need to pay attention to the right type, to choosing the right type of seeds based on their needs and the environmental conditions in their areas. Now, some of these seeds are hybrids, some are open pollinated, and some also can be genetically modified seeds. Now, these hybrids are the result of crossing different plant varieties. Then the ones that are open pollinated are the ones that are produced during natural pollination. Then genetically modified seeds are the ones that have been altered in the laboratory, maybe to impute one or two desirable traits like resistance to pesticides or herbicides, something like that. Now, the second example is fertilizers. Yes, fertilizers are farm inputs. Fertilizers are used to provide plants with nutrients that they need for growth. Now, these fertilizers can be organic or inorganic. Now, if we talk about organic fertilizers, we are talking about the compost or manure. These ones come from natural sources and they help the soil to boost its quality, while the inorganic fertilizers such as nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, they are the synthetic ones and they provide the plants with specific nutrients that they may not be able to get naturally. Okay. Then the third example is pesticides, insecticides, or herbicides. Now, these pesticides are used to control pests and diseases that may damage the crops. Now, the issue of pest infestation has been a thing of concern, especially for farmers in Nigeria. But with the use of these pesticides, they can be controlled. These pesticides can also be organic or chemical. Chemical pesticides are the synthetic ones that can be harmful to the environment, especially when used excessively or when used in a wrong way. Then this other type, the organic pesticides, are made from natural sources and are considered to be safer than the chemical pesticides. Then the fourth example is the machinery. Machinery, when you hear machinery, you already get the idea that it refers to all the machines that are used in the farms, especially the modern farms. It helps farmers to plant, harvest, process their crops efficiently. Now, we're talking about tractors, combinators, cultivators. There are a lot of them that we use. Now, this mechanization of farming process in Nigeria does not have to be expensive because there are avenues that have been made for farmers that need them to be able to rent them and then be able to use their services. Now, we have the fifth example, we have labor. Now, labor is a very critical input in farming in the sense that it involves the physical work that is needed to plant, cultivate, and harvest crops. All these inputs we've been talking about, the likes of seeds, fertilizers, we don't just get them, keep them, and expect them to enter the ground and start growing. We need labor. We need labor to be able to fix them in the way they are supposed to be, the proportion they are supposed to be, and to nurture the seeds till they turn to plants, and even as regards to the farm, to the livestock farm too. We need labor to be able to take care of these animals too. Now, farm labor can be performed by farmers, it can be performed by family members, or it can also be performed by hired workers. Now, all of this, in conclusion, the farming just involves various inputs, and these various inputs are very essential for producing very quality agricultural produce. So none of them can be overlooked, especially when it is direct in the production. And that is all about agricultural ecology. Join us in the next video as we explore another topic on agriculture.